Okay, so in the last class, what we were doing, we were actually discussing a theorem, right? So we understood that when we convert a multi-tape Turing machine to single-tape Turing machine in deterministic or non-deterministic, the difference in time is polynomial. So it basically becomes quadratic square of that. So if it is what it was taking tn time in the on the multi-tape Turing machine, it will take the same computation will take order of t square n on the single tape Turing machine. A similar theorem is there for conversion from this uh, non-deterministic Turing machine to deterministic Turing machine. The theorem is that if Tn is a function of n such that Tn is greater or equals to n, then every Tn time non-deterministic single tape Turing machine, non-deterministic single tape Turing machine has an equivalent order of, sorry, 2 to the power order of Tn time deterministic single tape Turing machine. This is what I asked you guys to read and understand. And before that, you need to understand the conversion, right? So if we really want to have a quick preview, so what we used to do, so whenever we had a non-deterministic Turing machine, we were converting that non-deterministic Turing machine into a 3-tape deterministic Turing machine, right? There were 3 tapes. The first was the input tape, second tape was the simulation tape, and the third tape is called address tape. So this 3-tape deterministic Turing machine can simulate any computation of a non-deterministic Turing machine, right? And whenever you have a multi-tape Turing machine, basically 3-tape Turing machine, which is a deterministic Turing machine, you can further convert into a single-tape Turing machine, right? So we need to understand how we convert, because multi-tape to single-tape Turing machine will be very trivial. We have already done it. We know the time, what it will take, the difference and all. Now the only thing is we need to understand if there is a non-deterministic, even if it is a single tape Turing machine which is non-deterministic Turing machine, how to convert it into a deterministic multi-tape Turing machine. So if you remember what we used to say, that every configuration, so suppose that for a given string w, your non-deterministic Turing machine goes from the C0 to these many configurations. So if you take all configurations of the Turing machine, what you will get? You will get this whole basically branch of computation. If you place all configurations, so every node there is a configuration. So from C0 you can go to C1 or C2 or C3. There are 3 possibilities, because it is a non-deterministic Turing machine. If it were a deterministic Turing machine, always a configuration C0 yields and it derives another configuration C1, and it's a serial. But in the non-deterministic, there are 3 different possibilities. So with C0, because there are 3 possible transitions in the non-deterministic machine, so there might be 3 different children of C0. Now C1 might have further. So now we do the numbering. If you remember that from the left, if it is for the C1, so its leftmost children is going to get C11, and if there is another, it is going to get C12. For C21, if there are 2 children, so C21 and C22, and if C3 has just one, so C31. and likewise. So suppose that if you go up to, for W string, which is written as A0, A1, then you have A2 and likewise. So for processing all these symbols, you have made all these branching on the non-deterministic machine, and at the last level you are arriving here. Now, when you say a non-deterministic Turing machine accepts input, yeah, please, someone should respond. When you say that non-deterministic machine N is going to accept this input W, what is the accepting condition? So you need to understand two things. When N accepts a string W, and what is the time it takes? Two things. Okay, Shubham is saying any one computation path accepts. What do you mean by a computation path that accepts? Define that. Yeah, so for others, all the terminals, that should be a final state. No. In the Turing machine, it is a bit different concept than what you had in DFA and all. So here it was not that you have to come to the last level. I drew it just to see whether you understand. There is no concept of last level on the Turing machine, right? In a Turing machine, every branch keeps running until it finds either Q accept or Q reject. Otherwise, it keeps going on, right? So there is no particular stoppage to that. But as soon as you find a accept or reject at any of the branch, you're gonna halt there, and that particular level is going to define the time it takes. So in this case, when N accepts a string W, it is like in at least one of the branch somewhere you have a Q accept, right? So that Q accept state is met in the configuration. So the configuration contains Q accept. Now when that configuration contains Q accept, so at that location, suppose this is the location where it got a Q accept, so this becomes a accepting configuration, and this is where the Turing machine is going to halt. So your non-deterministic machine will not go further on it. It need not really compute on all the symbols available in W. So it has started computation. As soon as it gets a Q accept, it is going to say accept. As soon as it gets Q reject, it is going to reject. So Remember the acceptance and rejection of a Turing machine, and especially on a single tape machine there is a single branch of the configuration going on. On the single tape deterministic machine, on a non-deterministic machine, whether it's a single tape or multi-tape, the branching is actually of the configurations are in a tree fashion. So in one step actually it branches, in next step it goes to next level, in another step it goes to next level, and these steps are like the transition steps. So how many transition steps does it require to accept or reject? That is the time taken by that machine. So time taken by a Turing machine, especially non-deterministic Turing machine, is that when that machine halts, how many steps it covered so far. So when you say this Turing machine decides in Tn time and it is a non-deterministic Turing machine, that means after Tn steps, it certainly decides whether to accept or reject. It should have a Q accept or Q reject state for sure. Is it clear or is there any doubt? Because see, we're going to deal with non-deterministic Turing machine for, I think, for some time. So you need to have a clear understanding of this non-determinism and non-deterministic Turing machine. Anyone has any doubt? Please unmute and ask if you have any. Otherwise, we'll move ahead.
I'm audible?
Yeah.
So you were just mentioning in the previous, just in the previous statement that when like as a tape is being read on the non-deterministic Turing machine, so you mentioned that as soon as it reaches the Q accept state, it automatically terminates. So it hasn't reached the rest of the tape.
No, it's okay. It might, see, you might have a Turing machine that accepts all the inputs, right? So that Turing machine, without reading the first symbol, it can directly go to the Q accept state. It is not reading at all. You can have a Turing machine like that, right?
So,
Or it might reject everything.
but without
So
reading the stream, how will you tell?
no, I'm designing a Turing machine for Sigma Star, or I'm designing a Turing machine for Phi. How
Okay.
you gonna design it?
So for phi, you will say the moment I get a symbol, I reject it. Otherwise, I give an accept.
You don't care about reading any symbol. You just gonna go to Q reject, whatever the symbol. You don't care. And if you are accepting, you don't care about the symbol. Your transition is just go to Q accept.
Right. That part I got. But
And
again,
whatever is the length of the string, you don't care again. Right? So
yes.
it is not required that you are going to read the whole string, but that was a requirement in DFA, NFA, and other places. Or even in the PDS, when you were saying you should have finished reading the whole input. But Turing machine doesn't have that kind of restriction.
So before completion of reading of input, it can give its decision.
Yeah, and see, if you are designing even a DFA, correct? Your DFA for Sigma Star is something like the same. The start state itself is a final state. Whatever you add it after that, that's a not required kind of thing. It's a useless thing after that.
Yes, understood.
Anyone else has any doubt? There is someone who is asking what is the topic name. Who is this? Can you please just. Mr. Q, can you just unmute and tell what you really want to understand? Mr. or Miss? Okay. Anyway, I think there are no doubts. So if you are clear with the processing of non-deterministic machine, then how we used to simulate it using a single tape, multi-tape deterministic Turing machine. We got this addressing for every configuration. So C1, C2, C3, C11, C12, C21, C22, CT31, likewise. Now, what we say that you copy the input W on the input tape and you don't modify it, is a read-only tape. Now this simulation is going to perform the processing of the input according to the non-deterministic transition table. Now in the non-deterministic transition table you have three choices after C0, but which choice you take, that you gonna actually decide by using the address tape. Now address tape, what it does, it actually starts with 0 or 1, whatever, or even let's say 0, and then it is going to get incremented one by one. So 0, then you will have 1, then you will have 2, then you will have 3, then you're gonna start with 1 1, then 1 2, 1 3, and then 2 1, 2 2, 2 3, 3 1, 3 2, 3 3, and then you're gonna move to 3-step digits, which is 1 1 1, and like that you're gonna keep incrementing the address. Now some addresses might be a valid address in this configuration tree for a given W string. Some addresses might not be valid because that node might not be present. For example, here itself, if you try to access C123, it's not present. There is no, actually that configuration doesn't exist here. So that's an invalid address. So whenever you keep incrementing the address, you first gonna check whether it's a valid address or not. If not, you're gonna move to the next address. And what this address is telling, when you get the address, it tells you the choice that you're gonna take on the non-deterministic machine, right? So, but once you fix the choice, it becomes a deterministic computation, because you are saying that from the start configuration, if you are talking about 1, let's say 1 2, when you are saying 1 2, what does it mean? This address says that from the starting configuration, you take the first choice of the transition available out of all possible. So you took the first, that means you came on this path. Then you are saying take the second choice from that particular node where you have reached. So now it had 2, so you are going on this path. So this is not a non-deterministic computation. It is a deterministic computation guided by the address given on the address tape. So if you really keep gonna increment all the addresses in the serial way, in this way, certainly it is going to really one by one put in all the addresses, which might be exponential, but that's fine. We said that still there will be, if the depth of the tree is finite, number of nodes in the tree will be finite many, and that's why we were able to simulate it. So when any problem is computable on a non-deterministic Turing machine, it will be computable on a multi-tape deterministic Turing machine. So this is what was the conversion from non-deterministic to deterministic. And from multi-tape to single tape, you can always further do it. Now one by one you're gonna process the address, and this is a BFS search. If you see, you're gonna talk about all the nodes at first level, then second level, then third level, likewise. And at any point of time, you will realize that if at any address, suppose that C12 is accepting, when according to 1 and 2, you're gonna simulate this string W on this tape. So every time a address is found to be not accepting or invalid, you're gonna again copy the content from input tape to this tape and again start from the start configuration. So every time you come back, you went to here, you said okay, it's not accepting, you went back, then you came in this branch, you said not accepting, then you went here, not accepting, then you went up to this point. Just like BFS, you realize that this node again configuration is not an accepting configuration, you went back. Then again you started from C0 and you followed path 1 2 and you reached here. As soon as you reached at C12, you realized it's accepting configuration. So on the simulation tape, as soon as you get accept, you accept, you're gonna declare that my machine is accepting W. And whenever non-deterministic machine is accepting, then only this machine is going to accept. Because you are exactly one by one going to each of the node in this process and checking whether any of these configurations are accepting configuration or rejecting configuration. Okay, so in this process, we understood that we are able to do so, but how much time is it going to take? That is the next question. We are saying that it's a Tn time non-deterministic single tape Turing machine. What does it mean? When you say that a Turing machine is a Tn time, it means that whatever the input you give, right, based on the size of the input, it is going to take Tn amount of time. So Tn is a function over n, right? So it is going to take Tn amount of time based on the input size, and within those Tn steps, it is going to output whether accept or reject. Correct? Anyone has any doubt in this? Are we good up to this point, or any questions? Good. So no questions. Then can you tell me that if it's a Tn time non-deterministic Turing machine, what is the maximum depth of that Turing machine? Because if it is a Tn time Turing machine, then what is the depth of the configuration tree? The answer is coming from here only. If you understood this point, what is the time it takes? So if Tn time it takes, what is the depth of the tree? That means the machine runs for at most somewhere order of Tn steps, right? If it is taking Tn time. What is the depth of the tree if it is taking order of Tn steps? What about others? Are you guys there? Understanding? Now I am confused whether you are able to follow it or not. Okay, yeah. So let's. So if it's a Tn time non-deterministic Turing machine, single tape. So the tree that you have really, when you draw this configuration tree, the depth will be what? It cannot be more than order of Tn, right? Because if it is more than order of Tn, the Turing machine will at least go up to that point, right? So the configuration tree that you're gonna get, the depth of that tree is these many. Okay. Now let's say that based on the transition function, you can also get to know that what is the maximum number of children a node may have. In other sense, what you are asking that how many maximum possible transitions can happen from a given node. and that is a finite number. So let's say that number is b, the maximum possible branching allowed from a given node. This is the maximum possibility, whatever. So it is the upper bound. So if you know this b, can you tell how many leaf nodes will be there in this tree? You know the depth of the tree, you know the maximum children possible from a given node. Can you upper bound on the number of leaf nodes? What will be the value? Is the question clear? I'm asking that suppose that this tree is order of Tn depth, and at most you can have b children from a node. What is the maximum possible number of, or what is the upper bound for the number of children node? 1. Sorry, number of leaf nodes. Yeah. So just like in the binary tree, if you want to find how many leaf nodes you have, what you get as the function? You get actually 2 to the power whatever is the depth, those many leaf nodes. So similarly here in the binary you have at most 2 children constraint, here you have at most b children constraint, so it becomes b to the power order of Tn. Correct? Is it clear? Now this is what? This gives you the total number of, oh, I think this order will not be there because we are saying Tn time, right? So it's a Tn time, so these order will not be there. Tn means the depth is Tn, so it is b to the power Tn. Now this is the number of leaf nodes. So how many total number of nodes will be there? Any upper bound on that? This b to the power Tn is the maximum number of leaf nodes that you can have in this configuration tree if the depth is bounded by Tn. What will be the total number of nodes in this configuration tree? This all values, if you try to understand, it can be computed that this first node, it has actually all possible b expansions, then every of that has all possible b expansions, and likewise that will be the largest such configuration tree that satisfies the depth as Tn and b limit, that every node has exactly b children. Now if you try to see in that, the number of exact leaf nodes that will fall on the last level, actually they will be b to the power Tn, that is that. You cannot have more than that. And in that, if you try to compute the number of all nodes, it will be number of leaf nodes plus all other nodes at different level. So what will be that? 1 at the root level 0, then at level 1 how many you have? B. Level 2 you will have b square, then b cube, and likewise, and finally at level Tn you have b to the power Tn. So the all internals together will be at most b to the power Tn, right? Because if you, this is a GP and you try to really take the sum, it will come Tn plus 1 up to Tn minus 1 level, it will be Tn plus 1, which will be Tn over b minus 1, right? So it will be at most the same. So if you try to compute the overall number of nodes, it will be certainly bounded by 2b. But again, if you we are taking the order, so we can ignore that. So we can say that the number of configurations are bounded by b to the power tn. So those many configuration nodes will exist in this tree. So this is the maximum number of possible addresses that you're gonna process. Now, to process every address, how much maximum time it will take on the deterministic machine? If you find that, if you multiply that time here, you're gonna get the overall time to simulate the non-deterministic Turing machine's computation. Now, one step of simulation. So this is this order of b to the power tn that we got. This is all possible addresses that you got, but every address you are simulating, right? So every simulation step, how much time it takes, if you are able to really find that, you will have the overall running time. Now, what is the maximum bound on this for a single computation? Can you tell? How many transition steps will be needed for any of the address given there? Is there any upper bound on that? Because you know the depth of the configuration tree is Tn, and once you define an address, your single tape Turing machine follows that address and just goes in that particular branch. So in the serial, if you try to understand this particular following the address, it becomes a serial computation. So how many steps will it require in a serial computation? At most the depth of the tree, right? Because that is what is defining the maximum size of the address. So any particular serial computation for a given address based on the non-deterministic Turing machine's choices will take at most order of Tn time. It cannot take more than that, because every branch is bounded by Tn time, right? That's why you said that the non-deterministic Turing machine is Tn time, because every branch of the non-deterministic Turing machine halted in at most Tn time. So you cannot have your single tape, this simulation tape computation crossing this time limit. So the overall time will be order of Tn times order of Btn. Now when you really try to see this, you can again write in the sense of 2 to the power log of Tn, right? And this b again you can convert into 2 base. So altogether this will come down to 2 to the power order of Tn. So this is log Tn, and this when you convert into base 2, it will be still 2 to the power Tn. So finally when you try to sum it up, it will be 2 to the power Tn plus some small order thing. So ignoring that, you're gonna get order Tn. So finally what you got, that to simulate a Tn step non-deterministic Turing machine, you are taking 2 to the power order of Tn time on a 3 tape deterministic Turing machine. So when you had a Tn time non-deterministic single tape Turing machine, when you converted it into deterministic multi-tape Turing machine, it started taking time 2 to the power order of Tn. Now when you further convert into deterministic single tape Turing machine, how much time it will take? It will take whatever the time it was taking, square of that. So 2 to the power order of Tn over whole square. Now, because whole square, it will come as a multiplication here, and further it will not affect. So still the factor will remain same, 2 to the power order of Tn. So a Tn time non-deterministic single tape Turing machine is equivalent to a 2 to the power order of Tn time deterministic single tape Turing machine. And that's what we claimed here, that Tn time non-deterministic single tape Turing machine has an equivalent or 2 to the power order of Tn time deterministic single tape Turing machine. So that is the proof of the theorem. Anyone has any doubt in this? Please ask. Any questions? Okay. Okay, before starting this, next, we're going to talk about P class. Tell me some algorithm that you use to check whether a number is prime or not. So some number n is prime or not. What algorithm you use? Anyone? Please unmute your mic and explain.
We iterate from 2 to the square root of that number and check
Okay.
for remainders.
Okay. Good. So he's saying that we are starting from 2 and we are going up to root n. And we are checking for if any remainder means if any number divides it. If remainder is 0, you declare that the number is not prime. Otherwise, if you don't find any number where the remainder is 0, you're going to declare the number is prime. Is it correct?
So we can skip even numbers in the middle if the number is odd.
Okay, good. Yeah. Anything better than that? Anyone with some better algorithm?
Every number that is not a prime will either have a factor of the form of 6k plus 1 or 6k minus 1. So we'll iterate from 2 to the square root of the number with jumps of 6. So we'll take all those numbers of the form 6k minus 1 or 6k plus 1 form.
Okay. So someone is saying, okay, I'm ignoring the constant. So you said root n. So how many iteration values you're going to check? Actually root n, right?
Rooted by 2.
Now,
Because
if you are skipping the even numbers, you are checking root n by 2. If you are further based on that, you are saying some 6 and k minus 1 or 6k minus 3 something form. So maybe root n by 6. Is it? Can you further speed up? Keep this answer in your memory, will return back to it. Right? And revisit this one. But before that, let us understand what is a P class. So when we made a jump from, when we converted a multi-tape Turing machine to a single tape Turing machine, whether deterministic or non-deterministic, how much difference we got? When it was Tn time, when we were converting, we were getting order of T square n. So it's a polynomial difference that we are getting in the time. But when we were taking non-deterministic Turing machine and we are converting into a deterministic Turing machine, whether it is a multi-tape or a single tape, actually they are equivalent there, they are equivalent there. So finally, if it is Tn here, you will get 2 to the power order of Tn time machine here, right? Now this polynomial difference and exponential difference, if you try to visualize it, it is like going back to the same thing that we discussed. If actually Tn is 100, suppose, so going to the square or cube, it will be just like what? It is like 10 to the power 6, 10 to the power 4 or something like that. But as soon as you talk about exponential, that means 2 to the power 100, it's a huge number. So what we understand from here, this polynomial or quadratic or whatever, it's a polynomial difference that is still in range of computation somehow, but exponential difference, actually it speeds up very fast and it goes beyond our reach very soon. So for a real computer system, exponential running time algorithms are really not very realistic ones, because for a very small input size they're gonna really take so much extra time. And most of these exponential time algorithms are actually result of something called brute force search. Oh, by the way, I should not be writing BFS. What is a brute force search? Brute force search is that there is a space of possible solutions. Your brute force search says that you're gonna visit every single item one by one in that space, and you're gonna really check if that is a solution, if this is a solution, if this is a solution, likewise. So you're gonna visit all the items in the space, and most of the time the possible checks that you have to really do for a given problem is exponential in the size of the input that is given to you, right? Sometimes we are able to get a better insight of the problem and we are able to design a better algorithm. What that better algorithm does, it doesn't ask you to visit all possible points, but it says, okay, there is this possibility of the subset, you check within that and you will be able to find your solution. And to check within a small set of solutions, that takes a smaller amount of time. Every algorithm that you design, it based on the insight, based on some understanding, that actually reduces your exponential search, and it does it in a better amount of time, which is we try to do it in polynomial amount of time. So here onwards, although we should be focused on whether it's an n square algorithm or n cube algorithm or n to the power 4, but to ignore all this, we say that anyway, if it is polynomial, still I am fine, which is actually a absurd, again, abstraction. But we are saying that until it is polynomial, somehow I will assume that it is something that can be implemented on a real world computation, or it is a real world computation possible. Otherwise, on computers we cannot do it for even a small n size value. So we gonna be more interested on, whenever we gonna analyze any algorithm, that there will be two factors, that every step, how many steps will be there in that algorithm, the number of steps should be polynomial in size of the input, and every step should be running for at most polynomial. We are just focused on the polynomial, right? What is a polynomial? Polynomial is that n to the power c for some constant c, right? So now onwards we gonna be focused on polynomial. What polynomial exactly, we are not going to say, but we are more focused that it should be polynomial. In your algorithm design course, you have to exactly analyze the time, but here we are more focused about it should be polynomial. We are happy. If it is polynomial, we assume that it is something that can be computed. Otherwise, if it is not polynomial, it is beyond that. Exponential, sorry, we cannot compute. So what is a polynomial time algorithm? That on a single tape Turing machine, or let's forget about single tape or multi tape. Why? Because if it is a multi tape Turing machine, that takes polynomial amount of time. When you convert it to single tape, it will take n to the power 2c, right? A square of that. Still it is a polynomial. So overall, a polynomial multi-tape Turing machine has equivalent polynomial single tape Turing machine. So we have to be focused now, forget about the multi-tape and single tape. It is more like it should be deterministic for sure. That is where we're gonna fix our model. So a deterministic Turing machine that runs in polynomial amount of time and computes and solves a problem. So we define a class P. What is P? P is actually union for all constant values of k for time n to the power k. I hope you remember what is a time class. So if you remember, time Tn was that it was collection of all the languages which can be computed by a Tn time Turing machine, which are decidable by some Tn time Turing machine. So now this P, basically P class is actually collection of all those languages, computation of all those languages that can be decided in polynomial amount of time by some deterministic Turing machine. Okay, now let's return back to tell me whether this algorithm, this Turing machine, what is the running time? Is it decides any of these that this prime, let's say prime is the language, prime is the language. Now I want to know, and always when I ask the running time, you have to see what is the input size and what is the running time, and you have to compare in that way. So you have to tell whether the prime is in class P or not based on this algorithm. Any of this, you could have used 1 up to n by 2, one can say 1 up to n, all those algorithms are there. Is this algorithm says that prime is in P? Okay. Shubham is saying yes, it is in P as per this algorithm. What about others? Ayush is also saying yes. Meghna is saying yes. Harsh is saying yes. Good. So this algorithm, all these algorithms are polynomial time algorithm, right? The answer is no. But before I tell you the answer, let me go one by one and ask. Sashwat, can you unmute and tell why you think it is in P?
Because we have a polynomial limit to the number of iterations we make, and then
What is that
for each
polynomial?
root n.
Okay, good. Ayush, why do you think that it is polynomial?
Same thing, sir.
Okay, Harsh, same?
Yes, sir. It has a polynomial number of iterations.
Okay. Meghna, what is your answer?
Yeah, it's the same. Like
Nikhil, do you have anything else or is it same?
it's the same.
Sir, same.
And Shubham?
Are you trying to get a different answer? If because I don't have any different answer.
Good. Good. So everyone is saying that, see, the limit here is n by 2. Here the number of iterations are n. Here it is root n. Here root n by 2. Somewhere it's a polynomial, right? The limits. Very good. I'm not saying the limit is this. What is the input size? What is the input size? When
N,
you're going to write a number on a Turing machine or anywhere, what is the input size?
N, input size will be N.
Is it? That is the question. If you are able to get it, you got the solution.
Or
When
number
you
of digits of N.
when you write a number n, what is the input size?
Number of digits of N.
How come 1, Nikhil? How can be the input size is 1? Try writing a number on a Turing machine. I always said, whenever you are talking about input size, always take this problem to the Turing machine, you will have the answer. When you want to check whether a number is prime or not, suppose that you have to write that number on the Turing machine. How many cells it will require?
Yes, if we take it in binary, it will be log base 2, and if we take it in tens, in the decimal representation, it will be log base 10 of N.
But log, right? Some log, I don't know the exact value, but you are saying that it will be log n base b.
Yes, ideally.
Anyone has any different answer to this when you are writing on the Turing machine? But how much time are you taking? Let's say the best is somewhere root n by something, some constant. Let's ignore those constants. Root n. This is the input size. This is the running steps. What is the relationship between the input size and the running steps? Is it polynomial or not?
Oh, this is it's exponential. It's exponential, unfortunately. Sir, it will be exponential, sir.
Good. Anyone, is it clear to everyone? The time that you're going to take, see, we always take about how much time your Turing machine is going to take. You are saying your Turing machine is going to take root n time, root n steps. But what is the input size on the Turing machine? Your running time is order of root n. Good. It's a polynomial in n.
But
It's not polynomial in the input size. What is your input size? It is log n base b. Right? So when your input size, let's say n dash, it is actually log n base b, and your running time, final running time, whatever you ran, that is root n, order of root n, which is order of n power half. When you try to represent this into actually n dash, what you gonna write? From here you can say that what is value of n? It is b to the power n dash, right? So n to the power half will be what? Order of b to the power n dash by 2. N dash is the input size, and this is the running time, order of b to the power n dash by 2. What is it? Is it polynomial?
it's exponential.
So the algorithm that you were thinking to be a polynomial time algorithm, it is not. So this, all algorithms that you have written so far, these are all are exponential time algorithms. But it doesn't mean that prime is not in P. The answer to this question is actually yes. But there is a very complicated algorithm that proves that this primality testing, it's called primality testing, this algorithm or polynomial time process. And The proud thing is that it is done by a Indian fellow only who proved it. He is a professor at IIT Kanpur. With his two BTech students, he proved it. And he got Gödel Prize for this. And his name is, anyone knows his name? He's a very famous theoretician at IIT Kanpur. He is a student of Professor Somnath Biswas, again a very famous theoretician from IIT Kanpur. He was a deputy director for some time. Anyway, I'm gonna skip the name, you have to find it. But proving that prime is P is a complicated algorithm, but yes, prime problem is still in P. But not because of these algorithms that you have developed or used or implemented. All those algorithms are actually exponential time algorithm. Is it clear to everyone? Or anyone has any question to it? No, not Professor Nitin Saxena. It's Maninder Agrawal, Professor Maninder Agrawal, and his two students. They use something called circuit complexity, which is a way to prove, because whatever you are studying, the same equivalent problem is in the circuits also. So circuit complexity they used and proved it, that primality testing is in, can be done in P time. Okay, let's move forward. Let's try to see some problems which are actually in P. So the first problem that we try to see is actually path problem. We'll come back to that, Shivam. Don't worry about the Gödel Prize. I think Nitin is a student of Maninder Agrawal. You might have to find. At that time, he was BTech student. Just check. I don't know the name of the BTech students, but during their BTech time, they worked with the professor and they really solved this problem. Okay, so path is actually, the problem is, you are given a graph, a source and a terminal sink, and G is a directed graph that has a directed path from S to T. Now, this is a language again. I have written the problem in the form of language. So what is the language? It contains all the graphs and corresponding pair of nodes S and T where there is a directed path from S to T in the given directed graph G. So path problem, when you want to check whether there is a path from S to T in a given graph, right? When you want to check that there are two nodes S and T, and if there is a path from S to T in graph G, this question is equivalent to check whether this G, S, T is a member of this set path or not. So this problem is equivalent to decidability problem for solving, not decidability. Anyway, it's a decidable problem. Checking how much time you're gonna take for solving the path problem language. So you have to find a solver for path and see how much time it takes to decide for this path language. Now, one way, which is a brute force way again, is that you fix S and T, and between that you take all possible combinations one by one out of all. So what is the maximum length of a path from S to T? If M is the number of nodes, the path length will be how much? Maximum M length. So if you fix S and T, there will be another M minus 2 possible positions, and that many maximum possibilities can be there in the combinations. If you are taking path of length M, then path of length M minus 1, path of length M minus 2, and really you, in the brute force way, you search all possible paths that can exist from S to T, and then for every such possibility you're going to find that if you are saying that there is a I and J you placed on consequence, if there is a directed edge from I to J or not. If not, then that particular combination that you have picked is illegal and invalid. You ignore that, go for the next one. So when you really gonna search through all possibilities, actually you're gonna explore the whole space one by one, all possible paths that can exist from S to T. But how many such paths might exist? Actually, it will be somewhere order of m to the power m. M to the power m. What is the input size? For a graph, what is the input size? To represent a graph in the Turing machine, you can use either adjacency list or adjacency matrix. Adjacency list is a bit shorter. If you use even adjacency matrix, it will be m cross m, m square. So the size is m square. But anything that is polynomial in m square, it will also be polynomial in m. Yes or no? So that is why whenever we talk about running a problem for a graph, we ignore the size in what you are writing the graph. We say the number of nodes is also an equivalent notation to represent the size of, because when you are talking about the graph and you are talking about only a polynomial time, it becomes irrelevant to what size of input you have taken. Anything that is polynomial in m will also be polynomial in m square. So therefore a polynomial time algorithm for writing this all nodes will be equivalent to that. But order of m to the power m, that's exponential time algorithm. So can we do something better than that? And the answer is yes, very much yes. You already know it's a BFS algorithm. If you try running the BFS algorithm, how much time does it take? It places a mark on the source node. It starts marking further if there is a directed edge from that to some all possible, and it repeats the processing of that. I'm not going to write that algorithm, it's given in the paper, you should go back and read. But the running time of the BFS algorithm is what? The running time is actually order of V plus E for breadth first search. So the same time it will take to detect whether there is a directed path from S to T. Now V plus E, if you try to see its overall order in terms of m, if m is the number of nodes, it is actually m square, because the number of edges can be at most m square. And the size is also m square, but let's say even if it is m, still it's a polynomial time algorithm. So BFS is a polynomial time algorithm that can check whether there is a directed path from S to T in a given graph. So BFS is this algorithm, right? If you try to write that algorithm in a Turing machine form, that Turing machine is going to take polynomial amount of time to solve the path problem. It will solve the set membership problem for the path language. Is it clear? Or any question? Okay, let's take another problem. Relative prime. What is a relative prime? Two numbers are relative prime. When you say two numbers are relative prime, Good. The GCD value is actually 1. Now, if I have to design an algorithm that solves this set membership problem for relative prime, this relative prime, solving the set membership problem for relative prime is equivalent to checking whether X and Y are relative primes or not. This question is equivalent to checking whether X and Y belongs to this set or not. So having an algorithm that can solve this question is equivalent to having an algorithm that actually solves the set membership problem for this language. Now again, if you try to do it in a brute force way, what it will be? For X, you try finding all possible factors that can exist, prime factors, and for Y also you try checking all possible prime factors. Correct? Now, if you will check it, how much time it will take? All prime factors for X, how much time it will take? How many steps will it require to find all possible factors for X and Y individually? It will be roughly order of X and order of Y, not beyond that, right? But the same thing, what is the input size when you are writing in X and Y? The input size here, if you try writing on the Turing machine, it will be actually log of X plus log of Y. Maybe a comma, so something is. So order of this. And what is the running time? It is order of X plus Y. What is the relationship between this? This is the input, this is the running time. Certainly exponential, not polynomial. So we have to find some other algorithm. So I hope you already know this Euclidean algorithm, right? I will not write that algorithm, you should go back and read that, but that algorithm is very simple, and the solution to that Euclidean algorithm, actually it finds the GCD value of correct. You take the maximum. I think you can ignore that X or Y, whatever is the maximum. Whatever the maximum you're gonna get here, the same maximum you're gonna get here, and therefore still it will be the same relationship. Okay, so Euclidean algorithm finds GCD of two values. And how does it find? How does it find GCD value of X, Y? Anyone who remembers Euclidean algorithm?
Yeah, it's a one-line recursive solution. We actually take the mod and pass it again in the same function.
Good. You take the mod and exchange the values, right? So the whatever the dividend, that becomes the next number to be divided, and the mod value becomes the divide. And you keep repeating the process. Yes or no?
Yes, until it becomes Z1, I think.
Until the mod value becomes 0.
Yes, exactly.
Good. So If you try analyzing now the running time of Euclidean algorithm, you'll find that the running time is actually somewhere polynomial in the log of x and log of y, and not actually x and y. Right. So again, the analysis is very interesting. I will not go deep into that. I'm leaving that as exercise. You should really read that and understand that. That why the Euclidean algorithm is a polynomial time algorithm for solving the relative prime. Okay. So that is your homework. You have to do the analysis, and the analysis is not something very involved. It is just like when you have to see how many steps it is going to run, and you will see that it is actually logarithmic, the way it changes the mod with that value. So you should do the analysis by yourself and understand it. Next problem, if we pick, so it says every context-free language is a member of P. If you prove every context-free language is a member of P, certainly every regular language is also a member of P, right? By default. And that is why every context-free language is a member of P, so you are able to do matching and all that, and you are able to build compilers and everything. This all became only possible because tokenizing and then actually parsing and doing matching, string matching and all that all is based on the context-free grammars. So you are able to do all that in polynomial amount of time. Now, did we cover CYK algorithm in the last class? Yes or no? Did we cover CYK algorithm? CYK algorithm was actually, if we haven't covered, you should read it. Now, if you haven't read that time, CYK algorithm is a algorithm to solve the membership problem for context-free languages. It is a dynamic programming algorithm, a DP, that works in the following way: that given a grammar G, you convert into Chomsky normal form G dash. Now, once you converted the grammar into G dash, so basically you assume that the grammar is given in G dash form. So what you're gonna do? Now you're gonna run the DP, and the DP was something very simple. You're gonna start with the string W as the digits A0, A1, A2, and likewise up to AK. The first level of that table. Have you all already studied dynamic programming in your algorithms course? You know what is a dynamic programming algorithm, right? It's something based on memory. You're gonna actually complete the table, you keep filling the table, and the computation that you have done helps you do the further computation. So you are reusing it. Okay, so what this algorithm does, it actually computes the first level of values, and the value here is a variable that can derive these individual, because it says Chomsky normal form, so a variable can derive a single terminal. So every terminal can be derived by multiple variables. You're gonna type in all the variables that can derive the first symbol here, this symbol here given. Once that is done, then you're gonna actually have one less number of cells to the next level, and the variable here present, I represent it as set of variables as x12, and this x12 is a variable that can derive A0, A1 together, all possible variables. So to do that, the possibility is that this x12 It is only possible that if you take this and this in combination and check if any variable is there. So if it is x, this is y. So you have to see if there is any body where xy is present. That variable is going to derive xy, which will result in deriving a0, a1. So that variable is going to be placed here. So in this way, you're gonna really build the whole table, and finally at the last level, you will just have one single value at this stage. So at this first level, it is a single substring that you are checking. At this level, this is checking for a0, a1. This cell is going to check for a1, a2. Which variable can derive that? This is going to check for a2, a3, and likewise. So length 2 substring from this string. This is length 1, length 3, length 4, length 5, and finally length n, if n is the number of characters in the string. At this level, you're gonna find all the variables that can derive that particular string w. And if the start symbol is present here, that means that string is part of the language or not. And if you try to do the analysis, the algorithm is given in the book. You should go back and try reading it and understanding if you haven't understood it so far, or if we did not cover in the last time, although I asked you guys to read it by referring the lectures of your seniors. So if you really try to analyze the number of cells that you're going to compute, the running time of DP to compute that is very simple. You have to see how many cells you are computing in the DP and how much time it takes to compute every individual cell. How many cells are we going to compute? Certainly the number of columns are order of the number of symbols that are there in the input. The number of rows are also the same, right? So therefore it is certainly, if n is the number of symbols present, n square many cells you're gonna compute, and to compute that what symbol is going to derive all the string, it is further n, because there will be n maximum possible combinations you have to see. So overall the running time is order of n cube if n is the length of this string. So because the input size will be at least the length of this string and the running time is order n cube, so it's a polynomial time running algorithm. Okay, so we are done with class P. Let's talk about next class, NP. We talked about the path problem. Let's talk about another problem which is called Ham path. So G is a directed graph. You have to check whether there is a Hamiltonian path from S to T. What is a Hamiltonian path? Can you tell me what is a Hamiltonian path in a graph? Just anyone, unmute yourself and just speak up. What is a Hamiltonian path?
It is the path which visits all the vertices exactly once, as far as I remember.
Good. I think you have studied it in graph theory or discrete math somewhere, right?
Yeah, discrete maths too. Yeah.
Good. Very true. Hamiltonian path in a directed graph, it is a directed path starting from S and going up to some node T, and in between it is covering all the nodes. That means the length of the path is actually exactly M. So now it is no more to actually cover all length paths. You just have to consider all M length paths from S to T. Right. Now again, here if you try to see what is the brute force way is again very similar to what we had for path. You fix node S, you fix node T, and then for all possibilities, you're gonna place how many placeholders are there. If M is the number of nodes, so you have M minus 2 placeholders where you're gonna place the nodes. Now there will be M minus 1, all those nodes can appear in any order, so factorial M minus 2, many possibilities might be there. Now for every such possibility, you have to check what? For every given possibility, you have to see that two nodes I and J in every such possibility which are consecutive, there is a direct edge or not. If not, then that particular possibility goes away. This is a brute force way. Can you tell any better algorithm? Can you think of any better algorithm? Can we use BFS to solve ham path also? Tell me.
I guess a DFS will make more sense if we try.
Oh, so DFS you are saying,
Hmm.
but can it guarantee? Anyone? BFS, DFS, or any other algorithm that you can think of?
No, DFS won't guarantee that.
So, can you convert 1 million US dollar into rupees and tell me what is the amount? Anyone? What is the value of 1 million US dollars? Oh, someone has already computed it. 7.5 crore. No, sorry, I'm not gonna give you my all property and life saving. Sorry. $1 million US dollars is the price to solve and prove that. See, this is a brute force, right? Brute force way to find it. How much time is it taking? M to the power M. While it's still somewhere order of that, while still the problem is what? The size is still order of M or M square. So it is not a polynomial time algorithm. Designing a polynomial time algorithm, you're gonna get 1 million US dollars. If you prove that we cannot design, still you get 1 million US dollars. So it's a very interesting problem. Proving that it's in P class, you're gonna get 1 million US dollars. and proving that it is not in that class, still you get 1 million US dollars. How it really arrives to that point, we will soon get to know. But before that, you have to understand that at this point of time, we cannot say anything about any better algorithm, right, which is efficient. We cannot say that there exists any such algorithm. It might exist with some better principles, some better concepts, something like, for a long time, this primality testing, this even P class, the primality testing problem, which was solved by Maninder Agrawal and his two students, it was thought to be not in P. But then these guys actually proved that this problem is in P. So we don't know, we cannot be sure as at this point of time in the human history that we have some efficient polynomial time algorithm that can solve it. At the same time, we cannot guarantee that there cannot exist any such algorithm. That is the current status. So it's a such kind of problem. Very interesting. It's a very simple problem, right? It looks very simple to a path problem. Or maybe you might have talked about Euler path, right? Checking whether there is a Euler tour or Euler path from S to T. That problem is in P. Just by looking at the vertices and their degree, you can declare whether there will be an Euler path or not. But Ham path problem looks very similar to those problems, but has a difficulty that you cannot design anything better to really find a subset of only solutions that you have to look. You have to go one by one to all the points before declaring the result. That is what is Ham path problem. So that is the hardness of this problem, that before declaring the result, you have to visit all the solution points, all the possibilities. And that's what we are not able to find any efficient way to discard the things there and only look at the efficient solutions there and comment on the final answer. So Ham path problem, we don't have any efficient polynomial time algorithm and we don't know whether any exists or not, right? But one thing is very simple here for even the Ham path problem. It's something called polynomially verifiable. Polynomially verifiable. What do you mean by polynomially verifiable? Let's suppose that if some guy actually computes a Hamiltonian path from S to T, so verifying that path can be done in polynomial amount of time. So anyone, if somehow does the extensive process, he is able to do the brute force and gets the solution of this question whether there is a Hamiltonian path from S to T. Now when he claims it with a proof that, see, this is a Hamiltonian path from this, verifying that is something that can be done in polynomial amount of time. Is it clear or not? Because if you give me a polynomial, if you give me a path from S to T and you claim that it is a Hamiltonian path, what all I have to check? Now my problem is not that much difficult. If you give me, if you claim that you have already knowing that it is a Hamiltonian path, the checks that I have to apply is the following. First of all the vertices should appear exactly once. So no repetition. Whatever the I, it should not be equals to j. None of the values that are following here. For all possibility from this to this. No repetition. And they should not also not be equivalent to, they should also not be same as SNT. Right? They should not be. Second thing that you have to check, that every I and I plus 1 that you're gonna place, there is a directed path in the graph G. These two things, if you are able to make sure that all the vertices and this path is of length what? This path should be of length exactly m minus 1. There should be, that means m minus 2 vertices in between. All of them are distinguished, different vertices, and then in the consecutive vertices there is a directed path from I to I plus 1 in the order. If you are able to verify, and verifying these three things are very simple, you don't require more than polynomial amount of time. You can traverse from S to T while checking if the path length is m minus 1 or not. Then on the go, maximum time that will be requiring to check if there is a repetition, again that will take at most order of n square time. With this you can verify all possibility, with this you can verify all possibilities, with this you can verify all possibilities. In the worst case, the worst of worst, it will take n square time or m square time if m is the number of nodes. And then checking the sequence, if the edge is present or not, you have to just check in the adjacency matrix, which is again a searching and direct finding. So polynomial amount of time, you can do the verification. If someone comes with the claim that there is a Hamiltonian path. In a similar way, suppose there is this problem composite. What is a composite? So composites is actually a set of all the numbers x such that x is equals to pq for pq are integers greater than 1. Now it contains all the composite numbers, right? For composite problem, again, if you have to check whether it's a polynomial time verifiable problem or not, the answer is very simple. If you are given two numbers x and y, if you are given a number to check whether it is part of composite or not, and someone comes with a claim p and q, verifying whether this x is a composite due to p and q is very simple. You just multiply p and q and check if the result is coming as x. If it is true and p and q both are greater than 1, then you can declare that yes, it's a valid certificate of the proof that x is a composite. So verifiability is something easy, but if you had to check in general whether x is composite, you're gonna do what? For all possible value of two numbers, you're gonna place 2, 3, 4, and here you're gonna check for all possibilities, and you're gonna keep multiplying and checking. So from the exhaustive search, again you have to do a very brute force way, and that will be exponential. Certainly composites, it is part of P because you have proved that prime, checking whether it is in prime or not is because it's a kind of complement of that language, kind of. But still the problem is polynomial time verifiable. So we are trying to understand what do we mean by polynomial time verifiability, right? And polytime verifiability means that whenever a problem A is given to you, this is a problem, a verifier when it is given to you, in polynomial steps, if someone comes with a certificate of a solution that given element x is part of A or not, a certificate C, so using C you can check in polynomial amount of time whether this is a valid certificate or not. So for example, in the case of Hamiltonian path, what will be the certificate of proof that there is a Hamiltonian path? A path itself. So someone has to come with a path as a proof that there is a Hamiltonian path. Or in the composite, someone has to come with two numbers as a certificate which prove that a given number is composite, because those two numbers, when you're going to multiply, you're going to find that yes, the multiplication and both the numbers that were given as a certificate were greater than 1. So therefore that number is a composite number because of those two numbers. Let's see another this problem if we talk about Ham path complement. So, suppose that Ham path complement is the problem that is defined as that is not, there is not a Hamiltonian path from S to T. Do you think it's a polynomial time verifiable? How you gonna check whether there is no Hamiltonian path from S to T? For that again you have to see from S to T every possible ordering you have to check, and you have to verify that none of the ordering is a valid path. Because, right, if any valid ordering is there which takes you from S to T and it is of length m minus 1, it's a Hamiltonian path. To prove that, you have to say that every m minus 1 length path from S to T, whenever you try to put the ordering, it is not a valid path as per the graph G. Either there is no directed edge in some ordering or there is some other issue. So you have to visit all the instances, those m order of m to the power m, and you have to prove that none of those instances are actually a valid Hamiltonian path. Tell me whether it's a polynomial time verifier or not. The answer is no. See, the search space for Ham path and complement of Ham path is almost similar. A certificate, you have to understand, the certificate for a Ham path, let's say that if it is for Ham path, if someone comes with a certificate that there is a Hamiltonian path, he just has to find that one Hamiltonian path and he has to give that as a certificate. But in the complement of Ham path, what is a certificate that there is no Hamiltonian path? That you must have to visit every single instance and you have to claim and you have to prove that none of them is a Hamiltonian path. So here the certificate is a single path of length m minus 1, which is a Hamiltonian path, but the Ham path complement you have to give the certificate as all paths of length m minus 1, none of them are Hamiltonian path. So that is why we cannot have a polynomial time verifier for Ham path complement. Please ask if you have any question at this point. Anyone has any doubt in this? So a verifier that we write, if we have to write it formally, so verifier is nothing but it's an algorithm. A verifier is an algorithm for a language A such that this language A is defined as following, that W such that V accepts WC. And this verifier that we are talking about, this verifier is a deterministic. When we say algorithm, here we are talking about that it is a deterministic Turing machine. Right. So when you talk about a polynomial time verifier, it means the algorithm runs in polynomial amount of time. So it's a deterministic Turing machine that runs in polynomial amount of time, and it actually accepts the certificate if you give a certificate. So this C is actually a certificate, right? So C in case of Hamiltonian path was a path itself. C in case of this value of C, the certificate. In case of composites language, it is 2 numbers that you're going to give as input. So the verifier is going to take that particular instance for the language. In addition to that, it is going to take another string as input, and it is going to validate whether that certificate, based on that you can decide whether W is part of A or not. So one way to define the class NP is in the following way. It says that NP is the class of languages that have polynomial time verifiers. What do you mean by polynomial time verifiers? That there is a Turing machine that exists, and it's a deterministic Turing machine, that in polynomial time it can verify the certificate that yes, and based on the certificate it can decide that that problem is actually the solvable, and you are able to give the answer. For example, let's take this problem which is called click. What is a click? Anyone has ever heard about click? What is a click? Anyone? Click is nothing but you are given a graph G and some value K, and you have to check that G is an undirected graph with a K click. Click is something that you have a subset of K nodes in the graph which are all pairwise connected to each other. So click means that's a connected complete subgraph of K nodes in a graph G. So you might have a graph G which is very big, but if there are 4 nodes which are connected to each other, so this is a 4 click. 5 click, if you will have, it will look something like this. Right, and this will be certainly connected to the rest of the nodes and rest of the graphs, but within those 5 nodes they are all connected to each other. So when you say it has a K click, that means there are some K nodes which are connected to each other pairwise. All possibilities are there, all possible links are present there in the graph within those K. Rest of the graph we cannot say. To check whether there is a click of size K, that's what is the question, and it is expressed in this form that does the graph G has a K click or not. Now this problem, if you have to check whether it is NP or not, what you have to do? You have to find whether it's a polynomial time verifiable or not. Okay, what will be a verifier in this case? If the problem is that in a given graph G whether there exists a k click or not. If someone has to really find that and give it as a claim, as a certificate, yes, the graph G has a k click, what certificate you want from that person? I'm sure you're going to ask that which all k nodes are forming k click. If you give me that as an input, I can verify it very quickly. Because if someone gives you that set of nodes V dash, where you have U1, U2 up to UK nodes, and this is a certificate that there are k nodes which are forming click, someone comes and claims it, that yes, because of this k, these k nodes, the graph G and K is a member of this language click. In other words, G has a click of size k because of these k vertices. Verifying that is very trivial and it can be done in a polynomial amount of time. How you can do it? You just have to do the following. The verifier will look like this, that on input G, K and the certificate C, what you gonna do? First thing, you're gonna test whether each element, right, is a member of G or not. In other words, all the vertices that you have given, whether that is a member of G or not, the k nodes, and that is a valid subset. You are checking whether it's a valid subset or not. Second, you're gonna test whether G contains all edges connecting the nodes in C. If both of the tests pass, right, you're gonna say accept, otherwise reject. Now, what is the size of the input? You have a graph G, you have K and the certificate C. The original problem was of the size, the graph and value K. So certainly it is of order of M, where M is the number of nodes. Now, how many time each step takes? Testing whether each element is a member of G or not. It is like C is actually a set of k vertices. You have to verify whether the first vertex is part of the graph or not, then second vertex is part of the graph or not, then third vertex is part of the graph or not, likewise. So it will take k steps to check whether each vertex is part of that or not. Once that is done, then within all k possibilities, you have to verify whether there is an edge or not in the graph. So between every V1 to V2, V1 to V3, so k square pairs, you're gonna check whether there is an edge or not in the graph G. So if you know ij value, you can check directly in the entry in the adjacency matrix, or you can check in the list or something like that. Again, that will be not more than polynomial in M. Actually, k square bounded by m square, and here it is bounded by m, the steps. So overall, this running time will be polynomial in M, and your input size is M. So this verifier runs in polynomial amount of time, and it can verify if there is a certificate, whether the graph GK, this G and K pair, is member of this problem or not. But one thing you have to always remember, that the certificate size C, it also has to be polynomial in the size of input. It cannot be beyond that, because if the certificate itself is greater than polynomial size of the input, your verifier is going to take at least that much time to read the certificate, right? And therefore the verifier will also run more than polynomial size of input. So because you have to run the verifier in polynomial amount of time of the size of input, you have to make sure the certificate is of at most that size. So it concludes that always your C is upper bounded by some polynomial size of input. And that is the only reason that we were unable to say that Ham path is polynomial time verifier, because here the certificate was containing all possible paths of length m minus 1, which is order of m to the power m, while the input size is only m. So you cannot consider a certificate of size beyond polynomial of m. So here the certificate was too large to be considered to be verified on the verifier, because verifier will take at least this much amount of time to read the certificate, and reading that itself will take more than polynomial amount of time. It will go in exponential. So therefore this Ham path complement was not a polynomial time verifiable problem, while the Ham path is a polynomial time verifiable problem. The composite is also, and then click again is in the same way. I think you guys are already tired enough. No one is responding anything. I'm not sure if all of you have left or sleeping. So we will end at this point of time. There are two more things that has to be covered at least. The first one is that another definition of class NP, which uses the non-deterministic Turing machine, and then the equivalence of non-deterministic Turing machine with a polynomial time verifier. And always remember this NP is means in many of the interviews you will be asked P and NP, and the question will be what is P? You will say polynomial time algorithms. When someone suddenly says what is NP, you will say non-polynomial time algorithm, but the answer is incorrect. P is certainly a polynomial time algorithm, because you are talking about polynomial time Turing machines, but NP is not that. NP, here the N comes from a non-deterministic Turing machine. So it's a polynomial time algo, but this algo is solved using a non-deterministic Turing machine. So it's a polynomial time is still algorithm, but using non-deterministic model, while here this algorithm is actually a deterministic model. So NP is not a non-polynomial, it is N for non-deterministic polynomial. So it's a non-deterministic polynomial time algorithm, and here you have a deterministic polynomial time algorithm. That is the difference. So in the next class we're going to understand about the non-deterministic Turing machine representation for NP, and then we're going to cover the NP completeness.